Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my November wrap up. The chaos that was November. In November I moved house, which is why we sort of have this holding background, which won't be here for that much longer. Not because I actually will have a setup, but because the bed that's going to be here will be moving in and I will have to reshuffle things a little bit again to find a new temporary filming setup before we get our shelving put in like January time. So it's been chaos, really has been absolute chaos. But despite the chaos, I did an okay amount of reading. I went completely rogue. I ignored the TBR. TBR? Who is she? No. But I did end up actually doing a reasonable amount of reading considering the chaos that has been my life. Yeah, if we're thinking about November, the whole month is just categorized by moving. Like, it was pre-move and getting ready to move, then it was the stress of moving, and I bought a house and we got the keys the day that we were handing in the keys for the old place. It was very much down to the wire on if I was going to be homeless or like in a hotel for a few nights. It was so down to the wire. So it's been a bit stressful, but then I also went to Yalk. So I did that and just enjoyed a bookish day away from the chaos. And I've been doing a lot of running. I have a London Marathon spot. So I am training now and will be training for the next 5 months. But if you want to support me, I do have a link, so I will leave that down below. And yeah, just my shameless plug that I am doing something that my body is not prepared for. I did manage to read a good amount of things. So I read 7 books. It says of those 7 books that it comes to 2,333 pages. But I think that's slightly wrong because one of the books, it says it's only 5 pages in Goodreads and it's not 5 pages because it was a 4-hour audiobook. So inflate that a little bit because Goodreads is lying to me. Of these, it's a variety of genres. So 2 were romance, 1 was a historical mystery, 1 was a sci-fi, 1 was a fantasy and 2 were fantasy romance. So a good range of things. All 7 of the books were adult. And then in terms of star ratings, I had some really good star ratings. So I went rogue and I picked up some things that went well for me. So I had 3 sort of 4.5 stars, 1 4-star, 2 3.5 stars, and 1 2.5 star. Variety. And then in terms of my rogueness, I continued in 2 series, but I did start 3 new ones, and my on the go is now at 29. Not quite where I wanted it to be at this point in time because I wanted to be bringing that number down, but oh well, if you're gonna go rogue, it's when you're moving house and everything's chaos. So that is what it is. Let's just dive in. I will start with books that I don't own physically because there is a couple of those, and then we'll get into physical books. So I listened to 2 romantic audiobooks during the month. I'm trying to find like a rhythm with running and audiobooks and hoping that my audiobook numbers are going to just start increasing as I do more and more running. So the first one I listened to was Two Can Play, which is by Ali Hazelwood. I think this came out at the beginning of November or October time. I hadn't really had any buzz about it, but I typically really enjoy Ali Hazelwood's books, so I was like, oh, well, this has just like appeared out of nowhere. Okay, I'll listen to that. It's only about 4 hours long. This is the one that says it's only 5 pages. Lies. It involves 2 people who work for opposing companies that are both trying to work on the sequel of a game that has previously been released that is based on a book series. And they end up going on this retreat together because I think the 2 companies are in like acquisition or that they're working together. So it has some of the tropes that are common to Ali Hazelwood's books, but with more of a game-centered, video game-centered aspect as opposed to the STEM aspect. I mean, I don't really know much about STEM or video games, but the STEM one seemed to work, whereas this one didn't work so much. I think it felt a little bit rushed. I enjoy the setting. I like the snowy cabin, that sort of cozy vibe, but it just felt rushed. So this is my like lowest rated one, that it was fine as an audiobook, it was fine to listen to, but everything just felt too quick, that it felt like it was rushed. I don't know if it was rushed in terms of the writing or just rushed in terms of the pacing. Like it just didn't seem, it wasn't up to par with Ali Hazelwood's other books. Obviously it was a fun listen, but it didn't really do anything for me. And I needed more time to start rooting for those characters, which it didn't give me. I also listened to Reckless, which is the 4th book in the Chestnut Springs series. So a series of romances set in like rural Canada near Calgary, following like these group of brothers, cowboys. And in this one we are following the male love interest is a cowboy, and that's what he does for a living, and then the female protagonist is a doctor. She has had a bit of a tough time, so her marriage has sort of like just blown up, all gone wrong, and they have an encounter at the very beginning of the book where she ends up getting pregnant, and then their story sort of starts like a year after that. I enjoyed their dynamic and how it all like worked out. I don't think it was my favourite in the series, that I did like their tension, I did like their angst, and surprisingly with some of the tropes in it, I did still end up enjoying it. But it wasn't my like all-time favourite. Although I do think I enjoyed their personalities. It's just I don't feel as though it had some of the same scenes that I really enjoyed in some of the previous books in the series. But I definitely hope to read the final one in December and listen to that one on one of my next runs. So those are the audiobooks. A book that was on target, a book that was in my plans that I read, did read one of them, is A Sinister Revenge by Deanna Raybourn, the 8th book in the Veronica Speedwell series. So I've been working my way through this series this year. You've seen it in many a wrap-up because it's been in a wrap-up most months. This was the final one that I owned, and it's the final one available in paperback. So I sort of feel as though this series is up to date for me because I can't get the next one until it releases in February in paperback. In this one, we have a case that they're following. It involves Stoker, who's our male protagonist, his brother, who thinks that he's being threatened and is going to get murdered. And so they're following that and who is potentially after him. This brother has decided to host a dinner party, and it's figuring out who the murderer could be amongst these guests. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing what's happening with the romance in this one and the sort of challenges that they're going through. So yes, just a solid continuation in this series. A lot of fun and an easy read to dive into. A couple of more rogue things that I did. So during the time that I was moving, I was reading something. I put it down, you'll see it, I'll talk about it in a bit. I was reading a book that was on the TBR list. Wasn't in the mood for it. All the books have been packed away, and I was like, what do I do? And I was like, why don't you get your Kindle out, Abby? My Kindle is the oldest thing that's ever existed in terms of Kindles. I don't even know if it's at least 10 years old, at least. But it still works, it still does its job. So I discovered that on my Kindle, I had Vicious, which I must have bought back in like 2016. I do also have this physical copy. And I was like, I could do that. I could do Vicious. So I read it. It wasn't in the plans at all. It happened. So I read Vicious by V. Schwab. I've read a lot of V. Schwab's books. This was just one of the few ones that I had not read. In this one, we're following Victor and Eli, and it's set in 2 different timelines. One, 10 years in the past, where they are at university and they are researching the topic of extraordinary people or people that have powers. And then in the future, where they are sort of enemies, and Victor is coming out of prison for some of the events that have happened in the past. And they are in conflict, and it's exploring how these extraordinary people are created, and what makes somebody extraordinary, and how do they get their powers, and why their friendship has got so bad and that they are now enemies. So I enjoyed this. I found that the writing style was compulsive to read, that I flew through it. I found it engaging. I enjoyed our characters, and I was really happy with the way that this all wrapped up. I'd say it's not my typical story because it's like a modern day setting. It's a bit more sci-fi. I class this as sci-fi. So it's not my typical story, really. Like, I feel as though going into this, I'd heard so many rave reviews for so many years. And actually, this is not my favourite V. Schwab. That I much prefer her fantasy stuff because that's much more to my taste. So I enjoyed this, but I don't think I'm going to be continuing on with this series. I know that Vengeful is out, but I just feel as though it's not exactly to my taste. I enjoyed it for what it was, but I don't feel like I need to continue on with this world. And I feel satisfied with the way that it all wrapped up and the conclusion of things. Some more rogueness. So this is where things went very rogue. I picked up Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare. This was also whilst moving. I was like, I just need to read what I want to read, and that was this at the time. This is the first book in her new adult fantasy series, which has a different name, The Chronicles of Castellane, and it's a multi-perspective story. I really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun with this, and I'm very happy I have this nice, I think it's Forbidden Planet edition. So it's set in a completely different world to her Shadowhunter books, but it continues to have that addictive writing style, and that each sort of chapter ends with a plot twist that you feel as though you have to keep going to get back to that perspective. One of our perspectives is a sword catcher for the prince. So as a young boy, you discover in the prologue, he gets taken from an orphanage and gets offered the opportunity to be the prince's sword catcher, meaning that he is his double and goes and attends events for him when there is a potential that it could be dangerous. And so he risks his life for the prince. So we follow him, and then we also follow a female perspective who has magic within this world, and her sort of going through the world. Her people are sort of ostracized for their magic. She is researching and trying to become a healer. She's got a best friend who is dying and she wants to be able to heal her friend, and their paths end up crossing in a very intriguing sort of way. And then it's this very political leaning book as we discover the politics within this world and the different sort of powers at play. And the underbelly of this city that they're in as well. So I really enjoyed this, would recommend it. I think the sequel comes out early next year, so I am excited to dive into that one and see how this all continues. I've had this like calling to me for a while, so it was going to happen. It was going to happen. So very excited that I dived into this. Continuing the rogueness, I also read The Courting of Bristol Keats by Mary Pearson, which published in November. I think this was a time where everything was packed away. Most things are still packed away, and I went and bought the book and I read the book. I was like, this was like the day. So I moved in. My partner then left the day after we moved in to go on a work trip. I was by myself. Everything was an absolute disaster. I was feeling so anxious and like overwhelmed. And I had to go to the supermarket and buy some things. And I walked past Waterstones and I saw the book, and I saw that it was this edition, which is apparently, I didn't realize at the time, sold out. And I was like, this is the day. This is the rainy day, Abby. This is the rainy day. You've been stockpiling your Waterstones points. This is the day to use them. You need to treat yourself, use those points, and get the book. And so I did. I was like, you've been saving these, and it was for today. So I got the book and I read the book. This is the first book in a fantasy romance duology. I've read Mary Pearson's other work, so the Remnant Chronicles and then the Dance of Thieves duology. And I really enjoyed those, so I knew I liked her writing style. In this, we're following a main character, Bristol Keats, and both her parents have gone missing, and she gets offered the opportunity to potentially go and find them, or find her father, who is believed dead but actually could still be alive. And so she enters the world of fairy who hunt for him and try and find him, but the person that she makes the deal with actually wants her father dead. And so it's lots of different sort of powers at play and different ambitions and different motivations. So I really enjoyed it. I found the beginning a little bit tough, that at first it felt as though we wanted to get to fairy and we wanted to get to that point in the plot, and so the beginning felt a little bit rushed to me. I was like, I didn't realise we were going to be set in the real world, and then this doesn't really feel quite like it fits with the rest of the story. But once I was in and I was hooked, and I was flying through this book, like absolutely flying through it. It was so addictive to read, like so compulsively readable, so compulsive. Like if you enjoy a fantasy romance, then this is a good one, and I would definitely recommend it. And I think you should read it. It does end on a cliffhanger as well, so you might want to wait, but it was really, really good fun. Would strongly recommend, and I had such a good time reading this. So then slightly less rogue because it was on my November TBR, but still a new release, so not one of my like series finales that I really intended to get to in November, but that was the Songbird and the Heart of Stone by Carissa Broadbent, which is the third book in the Chronicles of Neaxia, or the third book in the Crowns of Neaxia, but it is like the first book in the next duology within that world, because this series is split up into 3 duologies, each following separate protagonists, but still with an overarching plot. So you can't just dive in here, you have to read it in chronological order. So I've been counting it as a 6-book series. So this came out in November. I've read everything by Carissa Broadbent. I've loved her books, really thoroughly enjoyed them. And I did enjoy this one. In this one, we're following a character called Mish. I don't know if it's Mish or Misha, Mish. And she was in the first 2 books of the series. So we got to see her there and I really enjoyed her as a character in that series. But now we're in her perspective, and seeing sort of some of the traumas that she's been through. And then our male main character is called Azar, and he is part of the House of Shadows, but sort of has quite an elusive presence within that house, and he has control of the underworld, or works in the underworld, and they get tasked with resurrecting the god of death by the goddess of the vampires. So it is a vampire-centered world, and both our characters are vampires. Like with Courtney Bristol Keats, I found the beginning a little bit rough of this one. I think, again, it felt as though there was a plot and we just had to get to that plot. That it sort of skipped maybe a little bit of the build-up, and I was like, okay, we're going to resurrect the god of the underworld, but I just want to understand a little bit more about your motivations of why you're doing this and how you come about to that decision. But once I was in, I was really enjoying it. I was hooked, I was addicted, and enjoying the sort of plotting of it, that I felt it was well paced throughout, that it was engaging. We were going through different levels within the underworld that they were going through, and each level sort of had a challenge or drama that they were facing. So I enjoyed that, and sort of the challenges, the trials that they were going through, and the development of the relationship, and also understanding much more of the history and backstory to these two characters and some of the traumas that they've been through in the past, and the different reveals that we got. So there were so many elements that I enjoyed, but I did find that beginning a little bit rushed. I'm really happy with where this got to. It again has quite a climactic ending, which has left it on a little bit of a cliffhanger, so it's going to be a bit of a wait, I'd say, now for the second book in this duology, but I really enjoyed this and would strongly recommend Chris Broadbent and this series. Although I do think potentially the first duology so far might have been slightly more my favourite. Like, those ones were more solid 5 stars, whereas this was more like a 4.5. So that's everything that I finished in the month of November. So that I actually feel like I managed to read quite a bit, just not everything that I had planned, because I planned lots of series finales and I did not get to them, but that's absolutely fine. I do have 2 books I had started in November and did not finish, which are going to have to be plans for December now. So the first of these being The Atlas Complex by Olivia Blake. This one I actually had started early on in the month, like before moving house, and then I put it down, decided I wasn't in the mood, decided that I couldn't focus on it, and put it down, and then I didn't pick it back up again until December. So I think in that time I got to about page 64. Only really just started it. I have since continued on, but very early into December, so it definitely will be finished this month, because it definitely will be finished by the end of the year, but didn't quite get to finishing this one. And then another one that I started was one that I picked up at Yalk, and that is Buried Deep, and Other Stories by Naomi Novik. This is a short story collection that she's written, so some of the stories are based on some of the other series that she has written, and one of them is based on a new series that I think is coming out in 2025. Yeah, so in this one I got 96 pages in, which is 3 of the short stories. I'm enjoying these so far. I'm finding them quite fun. One of them has been from the Scholarmance series, one of them has been from the Temeraire series, which is not actually a series I've read yet, but I have been enjoying these, so I will keep plodding through these slowly throughout the month of December. I'm just trying to intersperse these when I finish a book to read one of these, and not actually binging the whole thing back to back. So those are some of the things I'm currently working on that I did not get to wrap up in November, but there we go. Let me know how your reading in the month of November went, if you have read any of these books, and thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!